geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gats and gittens, comic book fans the world over. Welcome once again to Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me questions about what I do for a living, and what I do for a living is I write comic books, strangely enough. So let's jump right in. Coach Savage. Hey, Coach. You mentioned in a prior podcast when DC's best-selling titles at one point were their Western war titles. Do you think it's possible for stories of that nature to be popular with the general public if published today? In my opinion, I do believe taste changed generationally, and I don't know if that type of material would be readily accepted by the confiding public or even the general public. Do you think these types of titles, if published today, would be popular or even sell better than general superhero stuff we see out in the marketplace today? Well, what happened there? Boom. Get those kids in line there, right? Okay. Yeah, I mean, the market determines what sells and what doesn't, obviously. So what has the market determined over the last few decades? Superhero comics don't sell. I mean, it's out there, except for a few events, a couple of tentpole comics. In general, the superhero genre is over. But because the comic book industry is run by, fanboys, and now people who think that the superheroes are, despite evidence to the contrary, that the superheroes are an endless cash cow for ancillary, money making, movies, TV, games, toys, all the rest. That's simply not true anymore. The bloom is off the rose, the gild is off the lily for the superhero genre generally in the area of movies and TV. We see TV shows and movies bomb all the time, and apparently the TV shows are bombing even more. Each one they add sinks faster than the previous one. So the cycle's over. Now you're going to go, oh, well, what about Deadpool and Wolverine? Deadpool and Wolverine is an anomaly. Batman movies are an anomaly. Spider-Man movies are an anomaly. They have a following all their own. They are like James Bond. They are the top of the heap of the superhero franchise and will continue to do well as long as they don't really screw it up. And look how many times they screwed up the James Bond franchise, but it still comes back. But superheroes overall, as a genre, it ain't what it used to be. So they need to look at the past of comics, and back when there was something called redundant publishing. And redundant publishing was explore different genres. If that genre sells, do more of it. So if you're doing Westerns and the Westerns sell, you do more of them. When the sales begin to flag, you look for another genre. When war comics, horror, whatever, they run their cycle. Now, the superhero cycle has been going on since the 60s. And even in that period, romance comics, war comics, Western comics outsold the superhero comics all the way through the 70s. It's not until the 80s the superheroes really make their big comeback, and we've never been able to get rid of them. Now, obviously, I like the superheroes. I wrote a bunch of superheroes, but there's other genres. We got to think about the medium. The medium is not superheroes. All comics are not superheroes. All comics are not Marvel and DC. So we gotta break out of this because, like I say, back in the 70s, DC had 5 monthly war comics, and they sold like hotcakes. The only reason they stopped selling, in my opinion, is because the quality fell down, because the company was taken over by a bunch of fanboy superhero geeks who concentrated more on the superhero line of comics, even though they weren't selling well, than they did on the war comics. And they hired cheaper and cheaper talent to work on the war comics. The quality suffered and the readers went away. It's as simple as that. You got to keep the quality up. And, that's part of the reason why we see the crash in superhero sales. But yeah, I think it's worthwhile to try and get out of this superhero rut. Now, if you look at the book market, the graphic novel book market, it's a whole different story. Lots of different genres sell. There are war comics and horror comics and mystery comics and everything else in the book trade market. In other words, what you find at Barnes and Noble or your local library or at Sam's Club. Sam's Club sells graphic novels aimed at tweenies. They're awful, but they aim at them. But this is a market that Marvel and DC, the superhero crowd, seem to disdain. That's not the audience they want. They want a bunch of imaginary hipsters hanging around the comic shop, talking about how wonderful their output is and approving of their political agenda. So all of this is a perfect storm of why the mainstream comics are in the mess they're in. And you look at crowdfund comics, truly independent comics, and they're all over the place. They're doing all kinds of, sword and sorcery. They're doing war books. I've done war books. They're doing, mysteries. I'm working on a Western right now, a kind of a comedy Western right now that I think will do quite well. So there's ways out of this, but man, they got to get out of this mental block. They got to change personnel is really the problem, because they keep coming up with new ideas, but it's the same people who came up with the last 10 ideas that didn't work coming up with the new ideas, hoping this one will work. And as Clint Eastwood said, a man's got to know his limitations, and they don't. Ian Potash. Hi, Chuck. A pattern I've noticed with great writers is that they never completely abandon a topic. They'll find a way to recycle it somehow in the future. For instance, Craven's Last Hunt by J.M. DeMatteis was originally rejected as a Batman pitch. What are some concepts you've had that you were forced to abandon originally, but managed to be repurposed at a later point in time? Yeah, this was going on a lot when you had some creators bouncing back and forth between Marvel and DC. I'd heard that Craven's Last Hunt was originally a Batman story. The Batman series, The Cult, was originally a Spider-Man pitch. So, these things go back and forth. You don't want to waste an idea. You put this much work into it, and if the concept is good enough and high enough, and I've done this myself. I was invited to do some rewrites on the Expendables 2. My rewrites, except for one major element, were rejected. And, I was kicked to the curb by the producers. And, the majority of my ideas were never used, but I thought they were pretty cool. I set up some really cool action set pieces that they didn't use in the movie. They couldn't use because they didn't pay me. And all I did was give them the idea about maybe having the part of the story take place in a mine. And they got all excited because they knew there were some caves and some mining facilities that they could use in Bulgaria real cheap. So that floated their boat. But anyway, I took my Expendables 2, the action set pieces and the main driving motivations of the characters and the villain and the rest, and I turned it into an arc in G.I. Joe Special Missions, if I remember right, with artwork by Will Rosado. So so I got to use it, so it wasn't wasted. Yeah, the writer never wants to waste an idea. If you got one that's good, and you for me, the plotting is the hardest part. Plotting, once you got the plot, the rest is a downhill slope. Now you just got to populate it with characters and get your ducks in a row and your action scenes set up and your big conclusion. But once you got that plot, that's really the hardest part, which is why so many writers avoid plot. And they write quote unquote character-driven stories. Okay. Kian Kurji. Do you have any favorite gods from Greek, Norse, or other classical mythologies that you like? Any stories from the classical myths? You mentioned that you do like the Odyssey, for instance. Yeah, the Odyssey and the Iliad. When I was a kid in the library, everything we read was either Civil War histories or Greek or Norse or Roman myths. And I read a bunch of them. I read all of them. And one of my favorites was Theseus. Theseus is the guy that went into the labyrinth to fight the Minotaur. It's a great monster story. That's what so many of the Greek stories. You know, Hercules, Theseus, Perseus, Jason. These are they're sent on quests or labors, and you know, Perseus uses his wit and his guile and his strength to take out the Minotaur. But one of his ventures, he ran across a character called Procrustes or Procrustes, and this guy scared the crap out of me when I was a kid because his thing was he's referred to in the mythologies as a bandit or a rogue, but really what he was a sadistic serial killer. Um, he had an iron bed, and he would, if his victims, he would lay them down on the bed, and if they were too tall for the bed, he would saw their legs off until they fit just right. And if they were too short for the bed, he would stretch them until they fit the bed. And you know, Theseus, as we can see here, took good care of him with an axe. He made him fit in his own bed real good. So that part was pretty cool. But the whole idea of a guy like that kind of freaked me out. Another was Perseus, who famously slew the Medusa. And I love the Perseus story because his birth, he was supposed to die at birth, and then his birth is part of a prophecy for the king of, I think, Crete. And it involves like one day a boat with black sails will come, and that the skipper of that boat will be your doom. And this king tries to do everything he can to protect himself against basically his grandson coming to kill him. But Perseus, once again, like Theseus, a guy used his wits as well, you know, defeating the Medusa with a shield polished to a mirror gleam, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I read tons of that stuff, and I'm, you know, mostly concentrated in the Greek mythology. A lot of the Norse mythology, I enjoyed reading it, but it wasn't. A lot of it doesn't make any sense. The Norse mythology, it's kind of crazy. It's hard to envision. Thank God we had Jack Kirby to do it for us. But what I did discover in later years was the Icelandic sagas, which were true stories of the Vikings in Iceland and Greenland and in the New World and places like that. And these were all compiled into the Volsung, the massive tome collection of all the Icelandic sagas. And I've gone back to them over and over again. They were a great source of, you know, crazy action for when I was writing Savage Sword of Conan. Travis. Chuck, do you thunderously recite aloud as you write Conan novels? I asked because I recently saw the movie The Whole Wide World, which portrays Robert E. Howard writing like that. Do you know if he actually wrote that way? Knowing what I've read about Robert E. Howard, yeah, he probably did. He was a big, you know, big blustery kind of guy. Real, you know, he was a combination of a withdrawn extrovert. I mean, I think that he was in the proper company. He was a bit of a live wire, so I can definitely imagine him doing that. Do I do that? No, I sit here very quietly and tap away. I don't. I don't. I don't say my dialogue out loud or anything like that. I mean, maybe in my head, obviously, I'm saying the dialogue out loud, but sometimes dialogue in prose and certainly dialogue in comics doesn't really work when spoken. It works when read, but it doesn't work when spoken. But yeah, I don't do that. But you know, I think we all like the idea of Robert E. Howard leaping up from his typewriter and shouting, you know, "By this axe I rule." You know, that's pretty cool imagery. I would, you know, that would be great to see. God bless that man. Comic 616. A question about French Legionnaire Colonel Lestrade, presented in the Marvel graphic novel 62 Khazar, or Khazar, depending on where you live. Guns of the Savage Land from 1990. Do you have any remembrance or inspiration for his creation, physical appearance, mindset, background? I was wondering if his name was a wink to Inspector Lestrade from Sherlock Holmes. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate you on the fluidity of the story's progression. Yeah, this is the graphic novel. This is pretty early on at Marvel for me. It was plotted by Timothy Truman and myself. Tim came up with the basic concept for it, and then I provided the final script. And it was a bit laborious. We proposed it because Jim Shooter had just left, and now we could use the Savage Land again. Jim Shooter had a moratorium on using the Savage Land, and once that was lifted, Tim and I proposed to Archie doing this Kazar graphic novel that would be painted by Ricardo Villagrán, Argentine comic book great. And I remember it was a little bit painful process because Ricardo handed in early pages and they were very quiet. They were very Argentine comics. The Argentine artists are fantastic. Many of the greatest comic book artists in the world come from Argentina, come from Buenos Aires. But Argentine comics, the one published in Argentina, they're kind of boring. And I actually met Argentine publishers when I was down there visiting, and they liked boring comics. They liked boring comics to the extent where they would cut the fight scenes out of their Spider-Man reprints. So basically, you just got Peter Parker, Mary Jane Watson stories. I mean, yeah, okay, you're shaking your head. Trust me, I was shaking my head. I was like, what? But anyway, Ricardo's, stuff was a little quiet. So we ended up bringing in Gary Koepp, and Gary Koepp, did layouts for Ricardo, which Ricardo was very grateful about. I remember Ricardo saying, "Oh, he has many good ideas," and Gary's full of good ideas all the time. And so that's how that got done. As far as Lestrade, I just thought Lestrade was a cool name. I think that's it. I don't think it was a nod to Sherlock Holmes or anything like that. And as far as his appearance, I don't remember. I'm sure I described him to Ricardo, and Ricardo jumped all over it. Did a great job. Rex Moss. I read Something Big #1, Interesting Start to the Story, and discovered that this was a web comic before it was on paper. How does a web comic generate money to be able to pay you? It doesn't really. Sad to say. Arctoons, has, millions of people looking at it, but they don't have to pay. And when I was invited to contribute to Arctoons, I jumped at it because it was free reign. It was like whatever I wanted to create, I could create, but I had to fund it myself, and I funded it. I still continue to fund creator-owned projects through Subscribestar, and there is a Patreon Archaven account, and that money goes to me, and some money from my shows on unauthorized TV. So, a little bit of money dribbles in every month, but it manages to cover the bills for my artists. Now, I don't get paid for these projects, but I don't really care about that. I want to create new IP. I want to have new copyrights. I want to have stuff to shop, ancillary wise. The Something Big books apparently are doing quite well, sales wise. So, and we do have someone, I'm not going to say a Hollywood guy, but a movie guy looking at it. There's some interest in it. So, all that's real cool, but, largely I get to work with, Frank Fosco on this, and I have a good time working with him on this. And I get to work with Anthony Gonzalez Clark on My Sister Suprema, and it's all, creator owned. It all belongs to us. So yeah, there's, I don't make any money off of this. I do pay the artists. I pay them what I can. I pay them what the market will bear. But yeah, for me, there's no money to be made in it, but I don't care. I'm getting to create new material and spin the wheel, and maybe the money will come in down the road. Who knows? It's happened before. Twin Spin. Rex Moss is back with, how do you feel when people say 25, 30 years ago, I was a child and you wrote my favorite comic book. Now I'm happy to work with you. Yeah, it makes me feel old, but in a way it makes me feel young, because I remember meeting my idols, artists. I'm not going to say I'm an idol, but I remember meeting my idols at comic book shows, early comic book shows where I got to meet Neil Adams and Gray Morrow and Jim Steranko and Mike Kaluta and guys like that, and old hand guys like C.C. Beck, and you just get to talk to them and pester them with questions and all the rest of it. And I remember, being, starstruck. I mean, meeting Jack Kirby. I mean, oh my God, it's Jack Kirby. And then getting to work with these guys, but I never ever said, I didn't want to make them feel like ancient. So I didn't say, I was reading your comics when I was a little boy. But I don't mind hearing it because I've been there, I've done that. So it's kind of cool. And it does kind of humble me when people say that my comics help them through a difficult time in their life or whatever, that I provided escapism during some period in their life when things weren't going well. And I certainly sympathize with that. I was hospitalized a lot as a kid, and comics were my big escape. My big escape from all of that was reading comics to just sort of forget for a little bit what was going on around me. So there you go. Good question. Christopher Cohen, since you're such a big history buff, especially for the World Wars, did you ever entertain a Wolverine story idea surrounding his time served with the 1st Special Service Force Devil's Brigade? Yeah, I did. I proposed a one-shot, like a 48-page prestige one-shot to Marvel, in which the Nazis get visited by the Badoon. Anybody remember the Badoon? They first, I don't know how many times they've been used. They originally showed up in Silver Surfer. They were like these green lizardy alien guys. They weren't real nice guys. Anyway, they come to Earth. They crash land on Earth. The Nazis find their saucer and they negotiate with them to begin reverse engineering weapons for the Third Reich to use. And so a commando mission is put together with Captain America, Bucky, Sergeant Fury and the Howling Commandos, and Logan. And they are basically parachuted behind the lines into Germany and eventually learn that the Badoon have a secret base on the far side of the moon. And they steal they hijack a Nazi rocket to go visit the Badoon and take them out. So, big World War II era action sci-fi epic. And it got shot down, ignored, whatever. But the thing I really am sad about is that I was going to establish the Watcher, retrofit the Watcher retrofit his first appearance in the Marvel Universe during World War II. And the character that meets the Watcher in the blue area of the moon, whoops, did that wrong, is Bucky. And Bucky's the only one who meets the Watcher. And the Watcher, of course, gives Bucky the secret or the MacGuffin, whatever, that allows our heroes to defeat the Nazi Badoon threat. And then no one believes Bucky that he met this guy. It's like, what, you get hit on the head? But I just like the idea that like this sidekick character is the one who meets one of the big movers and shakers in the Marvel Universe. But again, it was shot down and never happened. And if you're sad about that, imagine how I feel. Okay. Shan D. I'm having Levon Cade withdrawals. Do you have any plans to continue the series, or will Levon Scourge the end? Yeah, I know I left Levon in like a pretty good place. The first time he's been in a good place in 12 books at the end of Levon Scourge, but I am fooling around with the plot line for a 13th book and eventually a 14th book. I have a story, it's like a flashback story I want to tell about Levon's past, but the next book would be a continuation with Levon and Mary and Hope and Uncle Fern back in Alabama. It's a story that my wife gave me the idea for. She was telling me this court case she was following, and I thought, oh crap, that's a good Levon story. So if Levon were to get in the middle of all this, so yeah, I am going to do it. Probably sometime next year. That book will be out following the movie. But no, you have not seen the last of Levon by any means. Ben E. Bennett, thanks to Facebook. Chuck Dixon, follow-up tiny question. Did you come up with the idea for the big Batman-Bane fight to happen in Wayne Manor, the Batcave? Does the end of part 10 where Bruce walks upstairs and finds Bane there? Wow, that's even more personal and scary. I always look at that page and when he says, "It is you," and still go, Bruce is effed. No, I didn't come up with that idea. That was baked into Knightfall from the beginning. That's where the big confrontation was going to happen, as presented to us by Denny O'Neil at that very first Bat Summit that I attended. So no, that was not my idea. I would have been proud to say it was my idea, but it wasn't. And I remember Alan and I were a little bit jealous that Doug got to write that part of the story. But he was the regular Batman writer, and that's where the big event had to happen in the best-selling Batman title. We all understood that because we all knew how to play nice together. So no, it was not my idea. But yeah, it is. It's a hell of a kick in the butt for Bruce Wayne or Batman to return home and find Bane there, and Alfred possibly dead. Remember, that's kind of scary. Did he kill Alfred or not? So yeah, that's the background on that one. One more thing, I haven't done any movie suggestions, but I'm going to start. We're going to jump to 1983. I'm jumping over 1982 because every really good movie in 1982, you all know, you've all seen them. There's nothing really to share there. There weren't a lot of sleepers in 1982, and that's pretty much my function here, is to remind you of movies you may have forgotten or tell you about movies that have been generally forgotten or passed over. And we're going to start with High Road to China. High Road to China is a big period epic with Tom Selleck as a aviator right out of the 1930s pulp novels. And it takes place across Afghanistan and all kinds of places, goes into China and all the rest. Very, very Terry and the Pirates kind of thing. Very cool. This is when they were trying hard to promote Tom Selleck as a movie star from his international popularity, playing Magnum PI. And he made a few good movies. No real breakout hits for him, unfortunately. And High Road to China was one of the films that did not break out, did not get a large audience. But it's a fun movie. It's action packed. You got Tom Selleck and Pretty Bess Armstrong as his female sidekick. The period detail's pretty good. I love the dialogue, the exchanges, the action set pieces. It's good old fashioned rock'em sock'em shoot 'em up stuff. With a little bit of a romance angle there for the ladies. But it's a good movie. It's well filmed, and try to see it uncensored, because I remember that for some reason the Disney Channel was running it a few years ago, and they were cutting a lot of the dialogue out. It's not like there's not like a whole lot of profanity in this movie, but there were things they objected to, I suppose. I don't know. Another one from '83, Lone Wolf McQuade. If I had guilty pleasures, this would be one of them. But I don't believe in guilty pleasures. If you like something, you like it. Own it. Lone Wolf McQuade, Chuck Norris. It's my favorite Chuck Norris movie after Code of Silence. It's just a crazy gonzo action film. It's a modern day Western. It's almost a modern day spaghetti Western. Chuck Norris is a Texas Ranger who operates on his own, apparently operates without orders or anything else. He just goes out and kills bad guys, gets up in the morning, has a beer, and goes out and kills bad guys on his own schedule. Here he is at the border with a sniper rifle, taking care of business. Lone Wolf, where are you? Come back, Lone Wolf. So yeah, he's just as badass can be. It's Chuck Norris. They don't give him a lot of dialogue, so the performance is pretty good, and it's a lot of fun. But the real star of this movie is hold on, we're getting there. There's some chopsocky action. He kicks butt with a bunch of guys. You just can't put this guy down. He's indestructible. But the real star of the movie and the best scene in the movie is his Dodge Ram vehicle. There's this terrific scene. It's one of my favorite action scenes ever. It makes no sense. It would not work logically, physically, or scientifically. But what they decide to do is bury the bad guys, the cartel guys, led by David Carradine, decide they're going to bury Lone Wolf McQuade alive in his car and in his massive SUV. And he manages to drive the car up out of the grave and begin killing them all over again, which is why they put him down there in the first place. If you've never seen it, it's one of the greatest Gonzo action scenes ever made, and I love it. I mean, I will rewatch this entire movie just to see that scene in context. Another one is a Woody Allen classic, Zelig. And it's an unusual movie in that it's a mockumentary about a guy in the 20s who, some kind of a mutant, he was able to become whoever he met. He would adopt their accent and in some cases their appearance. He was a human chameleon. And this is told in documentary style with supposedly archival footage and stills and things like that. Here he is becoming fat next to a room full of fat men. And it's a return to Allen's more absurdist humor that he began his movie career with. Mia Farrow plays a psychiatrist who tries to find a reason why he is the way he is, why he is psychologically driven to imitate others because he has no personality of his own. But it's perfectly done, and this is before Photoshop or any of the CGI effects that would have made this probably an easier movie to make. All of the archival footage, all the stuff from the past, looks totally convincing. It's very cleverly done, and I imagine Allen was, had a lot of fun working on this, creating, newspaper front pages and documentary footage, and all the rest of it, newsreel footage and things like that were in period. And they really do a terrific job using, regular, process effects to achieve this goal. It's pretty seamless. Funniest scene in the movie by far is, if you look down there in the right-hand corner, is Allen appearing at a Nazi rally with Hitler speaking, and Allen keeps waving to someone in the crowd that he recognizes in the background of Hitler speaking. And that for me is the funniest movie, or the funniest scene in the movie. But if you've never seen it, it's definitely worthwhile. It's parts of it are, pants pissingly funny. Seriously. Hey, if you want to ask a question, you want to make a suggestion, whatever, reach out to me by the most reliable way possible. That's brunobookstore@gmail.com, brunobookstore@gmail.com. And I will certainly read your missives. And that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the likes. Thanks for somebody sent me a super thanks recently. That's a rarity. That was cool. That'll go toward, that'll put a few pennies in Frank Fosco's pocket. Because I take any proceeds I make here also go into the kitty for creator-owned projects. Anyway, hopefully I'll see you all down the